lot of what I do is helping people with their kind of 30-second elevator pitch. What is it that you do that makes you unique and special? Boil that down, make that interesting, make it a story. That's what people want to hear from you. How can you help, whoever your clients are, whatever you're trying to do? Hone in on that, work on that. Because when you are at a networking event or when you are in front of a room full of people want to know, what is it that makes you special? What makes you unique?
Hi, I'm Erin Marcus, former corporate executive turned entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Conquer Your Business. Welcome to the Ready Yet podcast. We're excited to bring you more than 100 episodes of interviews and insights designed to help entrepreneurs get the financial and emotional freedom they need in order to build a business and a life they're proud of. All right. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Ready Yet podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to my guest today, Alicia Webb of Bright Spot Public Relations. It was one of those things where I can't even remember how we met officially. And then we realized, how do we not actually already know each other?
Right.
So much crossover. You are in a field that is near and dear to my heart with the communications background. You're in my city that I no longer, you're in my city of Chicago that I live on the outskirts of now. And I love talking to you and your approach to business and what you have found as a need that you were able to fill. So before we get into that whole journey, why don't you tell people a little more officially what it is that you do?
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me on. So like you said, I lead a company, Bright Spot Public Relations. I'm a solopreneur, and I help essentially companies, small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses effectively tell their story. So we hear so much about PR and what is it about? And it's really effectively, talking about your brand, selling your story. I spent many years in corporate and different industries, everything from pharmaceuticals to manufacturing, supply chain, and went out on my own in 2020 when I was working with an organization with a pretty bad boss, and I was like, I needed a change. And I've been on this journey for the past three and a half years of helping companies effectively build their brand and tell their story.
Awesome. Love it. So let's get into some business. We'll do business questions first for you.
Of course.
I'm just curious, what made you decide this is the thing that I want to do? I talked to so many business owners at different phases of their business and helping them narrow down and figure out what do you want to do for people?
Well, I'll go way back. So my degree, like you, I studied journalism. So I always wanted to write. My career started in news, and that has just always been my thing. I have always loved writing, loved storytelling. So I've not been someone who didn't know what they wanted and was unclear about their path. News and journalism and media was just always a path that I wanted to go down. So I started off in news and was a reporter. And like I said, since made the transition into corporate. But when I was having a really rough and tumble experience with this boss who ignored me for months at a time and wasn't bringing me into projects. And it was just a really not good experience for me. And it was happening during the pandemic. So when we were sent home to work remotely in the early part of 2020, and this was happening, I was like, I would have one meeting at 9 a.m. and the rest of the day I had all this time. And I recognized that she had just been leaving me out of things. And I had to fill my days somehow. So I knew someone who built websites, and I had her help me build a website. And I just kind of started doing a little bit of work on the side in the PR and communications areas, and kind of just built it from there. And by the end of 2020, had ultimately left that role that I was in. So for me, it was just, I saw an opportunity, and it was kind of like the universe was saying to me, maybe this is your opportunity to kind of switch and do something else and pursue what you wanted to do. Because it's a horrible feeling when you work for someone and they're just leaving you out with really no reason. And it was very obvious. Pre-pandemic, when you were in the office every day,
it was harder, right?
Well, not only that, the building I worked in had a Starbucks, so I could go sit in Starbucks when I had gaps in my day, or I, could go visit friends, and I knew other people. And quite honestly, I'd made friends with the building security guards. So I would go and chat with them when I had breaks in my day. But when the pandemic happened and we were all home, I was like, oh my goodness, how do I fill these, what do I do? And I was reading and I was doing all the other cool stuff, but I was like, I can't sustain this. I can't sustain having a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. And that was it. So I just kind of started putting feelers out, and you still needed communications. And I think that companies were realizing they needed internal communications more. It was one of those things, the pandemic, people were like realizing that there is a need for internal communications. You have to communicate with employees. So those are some of the things that I was taking on was, not just external, not just PR, but helping companies message for their employees what was happening in the world, because so much happened in 2020, just beyond the pandemic. You had George Floyd, you had, diversity, equity, inclusion came up. So there was a lot of need for companies, and they recognized that they had to do something different. So I just kind of built on that, and, the rest is history.
So what has been your biggest, we'll go positive and negative. What's been your biggest positive surprise about owning your own business versus working in a large company?
The biggest positive surprise is, it's possible. I mean, I think people would have you thinking that it's just impossible. You can't do it. It certainly is possible. But B, the flexibility, the way you can pick and choose what you want to work on. If it's not a good fit, you don't have to take the business. If it doesn't work for you, that's okay. Obviously, in corporations, if it's in your role, if it's in your job title, there's no way around it. So the flexibility, that opportunity to really focus on the things that you want to do, I have found to be, amazing.
The one conversation that's in alignment with that I had with my boyfriend, he works for a big company. It's a great company. He works with amazing people. I say that to him all the time. But there's been a few dust ups between a couple of people that they seem to have risen through the ranks despite themselves instead of because themselves. And I said that I actually can't remember. It's over 5 years, if not longer, the last time I had to even interact with someone that I didn't like.
Right.
As opposed to in corporate when.
Right. I mean, and you're kind of, and the other thing I found, and what I've liked about this is you're not as siloed, especially in bigger companies. You do tend to be a little bit more siloed. You focus on one thing. I like the ability to work on a lot of different projects and just pursue different things, pursue topics that I've always wanted to pursue. But I mean, big corporate certainly has its perks too. So it's, you kind of, you pick what works for you. I mean, I was in a big corporation for a very long time.
Me too.
And in terms of the negative, I think obviously it's just, and maybe this isn't a negative, but it's a hustle. Like you can't really stop. You don't really get to slow down, because, it's not that you don't get paid on the 15th and the 31st, no matter what. It's always a grind. So, and that is good and bad, but you just have to prepare yourself for the possibility that, you might have one very big project that month, and that might be it for a little while. You just have to be ready for that. But if you have the kind of,
and do what you can to set yourself up to prevent.
Absolutely. And that's why you're always at a networking event, or you're at a conference, you're always looking to meet people, because you never know where that next opportunity might come from. And just keeping a super open mind, I think, is just critical to it.
Absolutely. I say my first post-corporate meltdown was when the printer didn't work. I realized I had
there was no person you can call. I mean, I've heard that from other people a friend of mine is an attorney, and she went into private practice. She went into to work for herself. She worked for a pretty big law firm, went out to work on her own. And that was one of the first things. She's like, oh my God, I don't have an assistant. How do I file this? How do I do this? And those are the things you have to consider.
Yeah.
When you ultimately want to go out and do your own thing, it's a risk, and you just have to remember those things.
The lessons you learn how to do things you never thought you'd have to.
Exactly. I mean, it's just the same thing, like the printer, access to files, the Google Drive, like you have to build all that on your own, because you don't have access to the company. So you're a one-person show.
And I'm curious if you've had these experiences. I've found that one of the shocking things to me was when we leave corporate, especially if we're successful at our jobs and you think, wow, I'm smart, I can do this. And then you're out on your own and you realize, well, I was really smart in a very narrow path that somebody else created, because no matter how big or fancy or autonomous your job was, the work just showed up. And once you have to create all the work and kind of like you said, remember that you have to go get the client and help the client and be organized, you can go down a few different rabbit holes of abject chaos, actually.
I mean, I haven't felt that, but I can see where you're coming from with that. It's just a very different approach, and every day is different, which is good and bad. Whereas in corporations, for the most part, a lot of your days are pretty, they're the same. It's a lot of the same. But in this world, you never know what you might be walking into. You could get a client call or message at any point in time. So it's a very different scope, I guess, for lack of a better word, of what you might be tapped to work on.
And knowing yourself well enough to know, can you thrive or do what you need to do in order to thrive?
Exactly. Do you have that mindset where it's, you keep pushing
and you just roll with it?
Exactly.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Ready Yet podcast, brought to you by Conquer Your Business. With decades of experience, Conquer Your Business creates business and branding strategies that build multiple 6- and 7-figure businesses. And we don't just show you what to do. We have an entire team of people available to help you do it, strategy and implementation. You can learn more and reach out to us by visiting conqueryourbusiness.com. So let's skip a little bit to your subject matter expertise while you're here. You know that being able to communicate with intent is one of my absolute values. It's a skill that I think is
critical,
right? So helpful to have, and yet so lacking in so many different places. So talk to me, you've mentioned telling stories, you've mentioned internal communications. What are you finding, like, if we're going to give some advice to the business owners out there on any of that, what are you seeing that if they would embrace would really make a difference for them?
Great question. I think that the most important thing for business owners to embrace is, you talked about this being my subject matter expertise. What are they experts at? And make that clear. A lot of what I do is helping people with their kind of 30-second elevator pitch. What is it that you do that makes you unique and special? Boil that down, make that interesting, make it a story. That's what people want to hear from you. How can you help, whoever your clients are, whatever you're trying to do? Hone in on that, work on that. Because when you are at a networking event or when you are in front of a room full of people want to know, what is it that makes you special? What makes you unique? And the other thing too, I think that's so critical is tell a story. I think so many smart people who are in positions of leadership or power, they just sometimes want to regurgitate facts and information. Put that in the form of a story so it makes people interested, so that when you are up there, whatever position it is, stage, whatever it is, board meeting, that they're interested and you can draw them in and, get them to want to learn more about you and what it is that you do. Because it is so easy sometimes to just spit out facts and say, in Q1 we did this, in Q2 we did this, in Q3 we did this. That's boring. Make it a story. How can people relate to this? What is the value to that person that you were trying to reach? And do it effectively.
And that is what makes you memorable, not just because you stand out, but because that's how humans connect, right?
And what is the saying? People always remember how you made them feel. And this is as a part of it as anything else, is how did they feel after you were on that stage, after you were in that meeting, whatever the case might be. People want to know how you made them feel, because it's so very easy to just spit out a bunch of numbers, but what was the impact? And that's a big part of what I do.
And one of the things, you're not saying it specifically, but you're talking about it, is doing all that with intention.
Absolutely. You're trying to get, you're trying to get them to partner with you, do business with you, whatever the case might be. Think about that. tell the story effectively, think about when you are in a situation when you're listening to someone, what do you want to hear from them? You don't want to be bored for a 45-minute presentation. You want people to talk to you, tell them what it's about, and, get off the stage. And I think a lot of us, especially people like you and I who study journalism, so much of what you're taught in college is 10 pages long, every little teeny tiny detail, which is great in that setting. In the business world, it's the opposite. Yeah. Make it as efficient and quick as possible. Tell me the story and be done. It doesn't have to be that 10-page paper that we were taught to write.
I love that
in
you
the
said
college
that.
level.
When I was getting my MBA, we were in teams for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And our team, we stayed together for the 3 years I was in the program. And there was a gentleman who was in sales internationally. My background at the time was very much marketing and sales. And so him and I would pair up within the team for presentations.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody loved our presentations because as sales and marketing people, our whole motto was be brief, be brilliant, be gone.
Yes. It's succinct, and that is honestly how it is supposed to be. And it's hard. I think it's so hard for people, especially early in career, to get out of that mindset of making it long, telling a really long story, making it a long pitch, having slides for everything. That's not always the case. And that's the other thing. And I think you're probably going to ask about this, but who is your audience? Bear that in mind. Who are you trying to reach? If it's a younger audience, you certainly got to keep it quick. If it's someone different, maybe you can make it longer. But I also tell business owners, tailor things to who it is that you're speaking to, you're going to be talking to. Because the topic or the information might not work for men the same way it might work for women. So that type of thing, tailor your message. And if you're trying to reach out to a reporter, does that reporter even cover the topic that you're talking about? Because if it's a health beat, a reporter who covers health, don't pitch them on a story about finance. Do your research, keep that stuff in mind, because as important it is to be succinct with your message, you also have to keep in mind who you're trying to get in front of. And people forget that all the time.
Yeah. I love that you're saying that on the PR side. So, I have this podcast. I probably get between 2 and 10 pitches a week.
Oh, I'm sure.
From people who want to be on the podcast. And it's me, 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 me. Look at all these great things about me, 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 me. And if they would just stop for 1 second and say, this is how I could help your audience.
Absolutely.
Them. It would be.
And it's even a topic, like I have something similar, I have a podcast as well, and I talk about people pivoting and, career changes and all that stuff, but people reach out to me and they've not even pivoted. They have a full-time job and a part-time job. I'm like, that's not the nature of what I'm trying to do. So people don't listen, they don't pay attention. So you as a business owner, make sure you're doing that so that you're reaching the right people, so that when you are up there and you're talking whatever it is you're trying to do, or you're trying to get media, are you even reaching out to the right people?
And I think people unfortunately think they have to do, they would prefer, or they think, or someone's teaching them, God help us, a ton of activity.
Yes.
When instead, if you did less activity, but do it better and more intentional, you will go further faster.
That's the truth. And I think so many companies, big and small, think every single week or every 2 weeks, they've got to issue a press release or they've got to announce something. And sometimes that announcement might not even be worth the time and the energy and the effort that you put into it. So bear that in mind. Do you have a strategy? Do you have a plan? What are you trying to accomplish? Because shooting out press releases and just saying, oh, we have a new product, may not be the best use of your time. How does that new product advance what you're doing? How does it, to your point earlier, help your audience? What are you trying to accomplish? And I think people so often think that you just do this stuff, but it's about the business. Public relations and communications is as much about the business as finance, as accounting, as operations. It's as critical to your business as anything else that you're doing day in and day out.
And I do think one of the reasons so many people think it's quantity is we're so immersed
Yes,
in
they are.
information, cable channels and 24-hour channels and 17 different.
I mean, let's not even talk about social media. I mean, there are content creators who post every single day, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. That may not work for you. Posting every single day is a challenge. And I think most of those content creators would tell you it is not an easy thing to do. So that doesn't mean you have to do it as well.
And you also can tell when someone's pushing that effort and their content just isn't that good, right? They end up reaching, trying to get to be able to say something.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, it is a stretch. They are stretching. So you don't want to be that person. If you only post every 2 weeks, that's okay too. As long as the content is meaningful, that is the most important thing. Just having a daily post for the sake of it, you don't have to do it. But if you are doing something interesting, or if you are appearing somewhere, or there's, a cool product launch happening, talk about that, but make sure you're talking about why it's beneficial to your audience.
And I think the other reason that so many small business owners fall into this trap is because they buy into what I call Insta tactics. Right? Somebody told them, well, if you just post every day, this and this and this will happen, when it might not even be right for their business or right for their strength.
And depending on your business, Instagram might not even be the right place for you to be. It's okay if you're just on LinkedIn and Twitter or whatever Twitter's calling themselves these days. Right. Those might not, Instagram might not be the place for you. And that is okay. Your audience might not be on Instagram, and that is completely fine.
Well, and I had a client who had such a niche business that literally all her marketing needed to be was to go to 2 conferences a year, make about 20 friends, and make really good relationships with them.
Absolutely.
Turn that into the $1 million business that somebody wanted to buy 3 years. Yay. And somebody had tried to convince her that Instagram was her play. Like, what? And
sometimes the trade show, that, to your point, that one trade show a year, for some companies, they make all their money at one big event all year, and that is okay. But you really have to figure out what it is that works for you. Yeah. Don't try just throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. Be strategic, be mindful about it, and you'll be way better off. Do not be that company that is posting across all the platforms. That does not help. Like, I worked with pharmaceutical clients, and pharmaceuticals is tricky because it's so regulated. They can't just say whatever they want. And they've had other people come in and say, oh, you're the CEO, you need to post on Instagram every day. Probably not. Probably not. That's probably not.
Clients are not on Instagram.
Right. That's probably not the best thing for you to do. But LinkedIn, if your idea is to try and get people excited about potentially coming to work for your company, totally great idea. That's where you need to be. LinkedIn is also a very good tool for a lot of companies. So just pick what, tweak it and make it work for you, rather than trying to be cool. Right. And doing TikTok dances isn't the right thing for everyone. It's great. And there's people who have found their niche and they've made money and they've become influencers, but that might not be what you need to do if you're an accountant, for example.
And pick 1, 2, 3 things max and do phenomenal.
And do excellent work in all of those areas. If you are a brilliant writer, or a brilliant writer or something like that, maybe you post blogs once a week, and that's how you draw people in. You find what works. And this all is time consuming. And I think other people need to recognize that it is time consuming. Like marketing, communications, PR work, it is a lot. But to your point, find what it is and make that work for you. It doesn't have to be everything all at once. Sometimes it's not sustainable.
Oh, completely. So what is next for Bright Spot Public Relations?
Good question. I think just like everyone else, looking for growth, looking to help those companies really effectively tell their stories and talk about who they are. I recently became a certified life coach as well. So I'm really dabbling in that space as well and helping some
I
of my
think those
clients.
go together for entrepreneurs.
Honestly,
it goes right because
it
the
does.
for the small businesses, not corporate, but for the small businesses, the thing that keeps them from being visible is nothing to do with their skill set and everything to do
No.
with what's in their,
And what's in their heart, and helping people kind of figure out what's next. I really focus on, I call myself a confidence coach, helping people kind of build that confidence to get to where they want to go and what they want to do next. And as someone who's had a lot of jobs and moved around in my career, I encourage people, that's okay. Your story is going to be different from the person sitting next to you, and that's fine. And I encourage people to embrace who they are and what they've experienced. And I'm really looking to build in the life coaching space as well. I'm PR person down to my socks. I'm not leaving that.
well, and the other,
But the life coach thing is something that I like. Yeah.
And it goes together because I find that if people are excited, the thing that holds people back is they don't want to look stupid and they don't want to know what to say.
No one wants to take a
do
risk.
it.
And you should be celebrated for taking a risk, is what I say. Everyone should be celebrated for taking a risk.
And if they had something they felt confident and excited to say,
exactly,
they'd be much more likely to go scream it from the rooftops.
Exactly. And you should be excited. Like your journey, your path, what's happened to you. There is probably one person who can benefit from that, even if it is only one person, but I'm sure someone can benefit from what you've experienced, what has happened to you, what you've done in your life, in your career. You'd be surprised.
Absolutely. So if people want to continue this conversation with you and learn more about how you can help them and all the things you have going on, what is the best way for them to find you?
Great question. My website is brightspotpr.com, and you can find me on Instagram at Alicia W Chicago.
Alicia W Chicago. Love it. Awesome. Well, I'm excited because I will get to see you in person again soon.
Very soon. I know.
A couple weeks here.
Yeah.
Thank you for your insight,
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. I really enjoyed this. This was great. Thank you so much.